You know, for all the references about sheep and shepherding in the Bible, I must admit that I really don't know much about sheep at all. Yes, I did grow up in East Pasco County with lots of cows and horses around, but no sheep. In fact, as a kid, I never even counted sheep to try to get to sleep. I guess I didn't have a problem going to sleep as a kid with five siblings. I guess that wasn't too difficult. Now, I can think of three specific times in my travels that I've encountered sheep in one way or another, namely in Ireland, Iceland, and Scotland, most recently. I remember that on a trip with my parents to Ireland, it was the first and only time in my life that I ever had mutton. Not a big fan. The first time I was ever close to sheep was when I was in Iceland a few years ago. My conclusion, sheep are weird. They have these rectangular pupils. It's really freaky, okay? And last summer in Scotland, there were lots and lots of sheep around. In fact, visiting some of these castle ruins, you often had to walk through these areas where there were lots of sheep. You also had to be very careful not to get a sheep souvenir on the bottom of your shoe. I also came to realize how skittish sheep really are. It doesn't take much to spook them to run away. Sheep have no natural defenses other than to run away. They need protection lest they scatter. Our first reading today comes from the book of the prophet Jeremiah. Now, Jeremiah is called to prophesy at a most difficult time. The mighty Babylonian Empire is at the doorstep of Jerusalem, and it only gets worse from there, ultimately resulting in the conquest of the kingdom of Judah and the complete destruction of Jerusalem. Jeremiah lived during a time of war, devastation, and heartache. He was a first-hand witness to the destruction of Jerusalem. I think it must have been something like living in Eastern Ukraine today. How terrible. How much suffering and misery must he have witnessed? He lived in a time when everything just seemed to be going wrong. We hear in our first reading about how the flock of the Lord had been scattered, not by God, but by their leaders, who misled the people to turn away from God, who told them not to trust in God, but in them and in their own political machinations. These false leaders are the ones who have scattered the flock of the Lord. But instead of focusing on the retribution that they will receive and the justice of God, Jeremiah instead focuses on the flock that the Lord will reconstitute from that faithful remnant. So even in the midst of this terrible time of destruction and bleakness, Jeremiah speaks words of hope. Jeremiah knows that just like sheep, we can easily be scattered and lost. But here we see the beauty and tenderness of God. The Lord, through Jeremiah, promises that he will gather this remnant together, bring them back to beautiful meadows. They will increase and multiply. Not only that, but they will no longer live in fear. Those missing will be found and will be together at last. What a beautiful and wonderful image of God. It is such a tender image of our God as a loving shepherd. Now, this was not new to Jeremiah. In fact, it harkens back to the 23rd Psalm, that beautiful psalm written by David, which is so dear to many of us, and as we sang as a responsorial psalm today. David writes in this psalm, of course, that indeed the Lord is my shepherd. No doubt Jeremiah was not only familiar with this psalm and prayed it often, but probably even knew the original melody written by David. Looking around, Jeremiah knew so well the distress and turmoil of his day. How many of his friends and neighbors did he see suffering? And no doubt that pained him. I'm sure that the psalm gave him hope, knowing that despite the challenges and dark days in which they were immersed, the Lord had not abandoned or forgotten them, that indeed he would ultimately gather them together. But David and Jeremiah speak about the true shepherd. Jeremiah is very explicit when he talks about a righteous shoot from David the king who will reign and govern wisely, who will do what is right and just and will be our salvation. Spoiler alert here, Jeremiah is referring to Jesus. Even though Jeremiah could have no idea exactly who this future shepherd would be, Jeremiah nevertheless trusts in God's providence. Jeremiah had no idea that God would not send an intermediary, but rather that God himself would come into this world to save us. In his day, David's principal concern was just trying to keep his people together and safe. He had to trust God as his shepherd, but he had no idea that that shepherd one day would enter into our existence and die on the cross to save us. What a shepherd is that? St. Paul, in writing to the Ephesians, reflects on those who were once far off, but the Lord has brought them close to himself through his blood. It is the blood of his cross that brings reconciliation, forgiveness, and reunion with God. It is the blood of the cross which brings the flock together. Oh, what God does for us. God offers us his peace. This should be very consoling for us, we who are near to him, those who spend time with him in prayer, those who go to Mass every Sunday. But St. Paul also speaks about those who were far, far off, and also being brought back to God. These are those folks who are not here at the moment. We all know people like that. Family members and friends who, for whatever reason, have turned their backs on God. The Lord is inviting them back as well. How consoling and reassuring is this, that the Lord has not given up on them. What is scattered, he wants to gather. Well, sometimes we may not see it or even be aware of it. The Spirit of God is at work in their hearts, beckoning them, summoning them back to the loving embrace of our Heavenly Father. In the Gospel, we hear this very brief account of the apostles returning after Jesus had sent them out. They want to share with the Lord and with each other all that had happened and how God had worked through them. But their ministry came with a price. People were following them as well, following them in great numbers. Maybe they're looking for healing or for meaning or merely to draw into a deep relationship with God. The gospel says that there are so many people coming up to them and beseeching them that, they couldn't even get anything to eat. It's not hard to imagine the scene of the apostles at their wits' end, just wanting to get away and have a few moments of quiet time with Jesus. They literally have to get into boats to try to escape the crowds. And even that doesn't work. They meet them on the other side. I think in many ways, these crowds are like all of us. Is this not us? Is this not humanity itself? We long for God. We long for something more, but sometimes aren't sure where to go or what to do. Like hapless sheep, we can chase after this or that with no real purpose, other than trying to find something that fulfills our immediate longings. What is more important is not the actions or desires of the crowds, but the reaction of Jesus to all of this. Jesus manifests his heart to us here. He is moved with pity because he loves them. He loves each and every one of them. He loves each and every one of you. Yes, so often we are just like sheep, lost, confused, vulnerable, not even sure what to do. All we know is how to run from one thing to another. But even in the midst of that, we are drawn to the voice of the Lord. It is the voice of the one who truly loves us. It is the voice of the one who died for us. The voice of the one who does not need us to pretend to be something that we are not. The voice of the one who forgives us. The voice of the one who calls us to a new and abundant life. The voice of the one who is beckoning us to eternal bliss with him in his Father's kingdom. Yes, the Lord is our shepherd. The Lord is my shepherd, as David says. I shall want for nothing as long as I am with him. We have all at times been scattered, but now he calls us back to himself, not to be chastised, but rather to be guided safely through this life, and to be loved for all eternity by him in heaven.